How's everyone doing today? Hope you guys are doing well. Today, we're going to talk about your vantage point. Vantage point is defined as a position or place that affords a wide or advantageous perspective or viewpoint. Meaning, depending on where you are, you may tell a different story. If you're standing to the left, you might see it a certain way. If you're standing to the right, or far away, or up close, you might see totally different things. Or talking about a topic, you may have a different perspective due to where your stand in life is. We're in a political season, right now still. And, with politics, you can hear crazy things, but depending on what side that you lean on, rather conservative, liberal, or anywhere in between, you can view something totally different. A lot of times people learn objective because of their vantage point. So when they see, say, the president say something, if they're aligned with the president, they're going to find the best viewpoint possible. Or if they don't like the president, they're going to find the most negative way to take anything that they say. So our vantage points are very, very particular. Because the reason why is because we believe what we want to believe. Where we're at in our lives, we have a certain perspective, a certain vantage point, so to say, a certain standpoint. So perspective and point of view is a key factor when it comes to that vantage point. It's in the definition. So I want to look at one story in particular in the Bible. And I'm going to talk about the thieves on the cross. And it's going to go somewhere, okay? So let's see what the Bible says about them. When I talk about the thieves on the cross, you already come up with something in your mind. The most popular story that when we think about the thieves on the cross is that there was one thief that was bad and then one thief that was repentant, and Jesus said, tonight you'll be with me in paradise. That's the story that we most people think of first when they think of the thieves on the cross. And it's funny that that's the story that we think of the most when that is comes from the book of Luke, and Luke himself wasn't there at the crucifixion, but he is the one that had the most sources. Though Luke's perspective, the Gospel of Luke comes from other people. Luke went around and interviewed numerous people and got a lot of different accounts as to what happened during the time that Jesus had his ministry. So going into Luke chapter 23, verse 32 through 43, we're going to look at this particular story in all of the different Gospels so we can see the different vantage points that occurred. So starting off in verse 32, two other men, both criminals, were also led out with him to be executed. When they came to the place called the skull, there they crucified him, along with the criminals, one on his right, the other on his left. Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they divided up his clothes by casting lots. The people stood watching, and the rulers even sneered at him. They said, "He saved others. Let him save himself, if he is Christ of God, the chosen one." The soldiers also came up and mocked him. They offered him wine vinegar and said, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was written notice above him, which read, "This is the king of the Jews." One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Christ? Save yourself and us." But the other criminal rebuked him. "Don't you fear God," he said, "since you are under the same sentence? We are punished justly, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Jesus answered him, "I tell you the truth, today you will be with me in paradise." So Luke interviews people, and this is the account that the people gave him. Now, when we look at in Matthew's telling, what Matthew says about this, in Matthew chapter 26, verse 56, it says that all the disciples deserted him and fled. But to me, that just says at the very least, Matthew fled, because he doesn't, how does he know what everyone's doing? He fled, but a lot of historians and theologians believe since Matthew's prior position of being a high-ranking official, he had some insight as to what was occurring there. But most historians, like I said, believe that Matthew heard about what happened from more than likely Mark, which we'll talk about later. But in Matthew chapter 27 through 38, there's only one reference to the people that were crucified with him, and it says, two robbers were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. They don't go into all of those other details. But also Matthew and John are the only two to mention that soldiers divided Jesus' clothes and cast lots for them. No one else mentions that. Which also draws to where people believe that Matthew heard about what happened from the other disciples. He heard about this from Mark, like he heard about it from Peter, basically. Now John, who described himself as the disciple that Jesus loved, he was right there front and center. He was right there in front of Jesus when this happened. In John chapter 19, verse 18, here they crucified him, and with him two others, one on each side and Jesus in the middle. John doesn't even care what those guys were on the cross for. He doesn't care what their crimes were. He doesn't care about them. He doesn't mention anything they were saying. If those two men did have a conversation with Jesus, John would have heard it. But John doesn't care because that's not what he was focused on. He doesn't mention all of that back and forth. Oh, don't you fear God? He didn't mention any of that because John was focused on Jesus. What I'm focusing on is the different vantage points here, like I said. That's what the Gospels are. Those are different vantage points, different perspectives, different standpoints. But John, when he's telling this story about Jesus on the cross, he doesn't care about the thieves in their conversation. He doesn't care about them hurling insults or one of the thieves defending Jesus. He cares about Jesus. Those other two guys don't matter to him. Sometimes we need to act like John and not even give any space to what people are talking about. No matter what they're saying. We're giving people that don't matter in our story leading roles. People that should have been minor characters, we turn into main characters. We need to stop mentioning people that don't need to be mentioned. Don't worry about them. Worry about Jesus, just like John was worrying about Jesus. That's what he was there for. He didn't care about those two idiots on the cross. He didn't care about the other disciples. He cared about Jesus and Jesus alone. What are you focusing on? What minor characters are you giving major roles to? Well, one of my favorite actors is Samuel L. Jackson. He's a fine actor. He's been in a ton of movies. In fact, he's actually the most profitable movie star ever. Meaning that the movies that he has starred in have grossed more money than any other movies collectively for any of. So you think of any big name actor, the movies that Samuel L. Jackson was in generated more money than the movies that any of those actors were in. You don't believe me? Look it up. That's a Google for you. Now, but how often, because Samuel L. Jackson, he's just in the movie, no disrespect to him, but how often do you hear people call a movie a Samuel L. Jackson movie? Or how often do people go to the movie to see him? The main movies that propelled him into that leading spot was Jurassic Park. When Jurassic Park opened, how many people were saying, oh, I gotta go see Jurassic Park, Samuel L. Jackson's in there, and I already know him and those dinosaurs are gonna be going wild. No one said that. He was in 3 Star Wars movies. No one went to those movies and says, I gotta see Samuel L. Jackson because I know he's gonna get a lightsaber and he's gonna be wrecking it. No one said that. He was in 11 Marvel movies, but no one went to see any of those Marvel movies because they wanted to see Samuel L. Jackson. A lot of times in those Marvel movies, people don't even know he's in them until after they gets a surprise he's even in the movie. And some of them he's just in the end credit scenes. It's not like Denzel Washington or Will Smith or Tom Hanks where people will go see those movies for their performances regardless what the movie is. People will go see Tom Hanks be a captain of a boat, then a captain of a plane. People go see Denzel to be a cowboy, or Denzel to be a blind guy, or Denzel to be a crooked cop. You know, it's all about the roles that you're giving people. Are you giving people leading roles when they should be a minor character? In John's eyes, those 2 guys on the cross didn't deserve any of his time. They didn't deserve to be mentioned. Outside of, yeah, there were 2 people on there, one on his right, one on his left. Okay? He didn't go into all those details. And again, if anybody knew what was happening, John would have been there because he was right there front and center. But again, he didn't care. That wasn't what his assignment was. But I want to show you how the vantage point can change again. Remember, vantage point is our vocabulary word of the day. So let's look at the book of Mark. Mark chapter 15, 27 through 32. Now I'm going to show you that the story can be told totally different. Again, everybody, when they recollect about the thieves on the cross, they think about the one thief that was mean, that was hurling insults, and then the thief that defended Jesus. Verse 27. They crucified two robbers with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "So you are going to destroy the temple and build it in 3 days? Come down from the cross and save yourself." In the same way, the chief priests and the teachers of the law mocked him among themselves. He saved others, they said, but he can't save himself. Let this Christ, the King of Israel, come down and now from the cross, that we may see and believe. Those who crucified with him also heaped insults on him. So Mark tells this story very differently about the thieves on the cross. Peter was standing far away in all of the accounts, because he was afraid to be there. And he's telling people he doesn't even know who Jesus was, so he's standing far away. So in his point of view, the thieves are talking down to Jesus. Both of them are, because he just can see he's not close enough to be intimate enough to get the thing. So he hears about people saying negative things, and he just looks like, oh yeah, bet those thieves had something wrong too. In my perspective, don't take this to the bank or anything, Peter was too far away to hear what they were saying. But where are you standing when it comes to Christ? What is your vantage point? Are you in the midst, or are you at a distance assuming what's going on? There are times where we wonder if God is really with us, regardless of all the other miracles that God is doing for us. We have the nerve to wonder if he is with us. God is literally right there beside us, and we wonder if he's with us. The Israelites wondered the same thing. They saw all these miracles, and then they said, oh, let's make a god out of our necklaces. God was there in the midst of everything. If you think about all those down moments in your life, God was in the midst of that. But we have a high calling. And you think about a doctor, a medical doctor. They have a high calling. They have a lot of responsibility that they have to do. If there is ever an emergency in their vicinity, if they're driving by, they have to stop. If there's an emergency happening in their vicinity, they have to help. They don't get to just watch and pull out their phone and record like some of us do. They have to help. They can't drive by a severe accident. They have to pull over and stop and help. If it's discovered that they didn't, they could be in a lot of trouble because they have a high cost to being a doctor. There's a high calling on their life. There was a story about a woman on a flight, and she was younger, and there was an emergency, and then they needed a doctor. And she said, well, I'm a doctor, I can help. And everyone said, no, ma'am, we need a real doctor. But she kept saying, I'm really a doctor, and I can help. Now, it would have been easy for her to just sit down and just let nature take its course, so to say. But she kept trying to help. She kept saying, hey, I'm a doctor. But a doctor can't just not help. They have to help. That's the same call on our lives. We have to share hope with others. When we encounter a person that is in trouble, spiritually, we have to speak up. We have to help. There's this famous line by an atheist that said, I don't believe in God, but for any Christian that does not go out of their way to share the gospel with me, to share God with me, how hateful must they be to know that since I'm an atheist, I am going to end up in hell? How angry do you have to be, or how much do you have to hate a person to let them just go into eternity of fire? That's really something to think about. We have to speak up. We have to be conscious about what we are allowing into us. And I'm not talking about a cliche thing like the music or the movies we listen to and watch. It's about the conversations that we engage in. There's a story called the 3 C's. A sieve is something that separates things out. So a guy runs up to Socrates, the philosopher, and says, I heard something about you. Let me tell you. Socrates replies and says, well, Let's put it to the test to see if I really want to hear it. He said, first, is what you heard about me true? The guy says, well, I just overheard it, so I'm unsure. Socrates continues and says, well, what are you about? The thing that you're about to tell me, is it something good? The man responds, well, no. It's actually the opposite. Socrates says, well, what you're about to tell me, is it necessary? The man responds, well, not really. Socrates says, well, if the story you heard is not true, isn't good, or necessary, then don't bother me with it. We need to be wise and not subscribe to unnecessary commentary. Paul talks about this in his letter to Titus. Titus chapter 3, verse 9 and 10. But avoid foolish controversies and genealogies and arguments and quarrels about the law, because these are unprofitable and useless. Warn a divisive person once, and then warn him a second time. After that, have nothing to do with him. We need to follow what is commanded of us. God gave us commandments. We should follow them. The Israelites needed those commandments. They were just coming out of slavery. Their way of life was dictated by someone else. So now God was dictating how to live. God is saying, this is how you are supposed to live now. You are no longer under someone else's rule. You are under me now. This is my law. Paul wrote and said, the only way that I know what sin is because of the law. You know, people always try to quote Paul to try to figure out ways to not follow the commandments of the Old Testament. But Paul himself said, the only way that I know what sin is because the law taught me what sin is. And the word sin means to miss the mark. The mark is the law. Now, what does our prayer life look like? If you only pray when you're in trouble, then you're in trouble. We need to stop acting like the Pharisees. The Pharisees weren't these evildoers or something, you know, as we sometimes view them when we're looking at it because of our vantage point and because of what they were persecuting, you know, the prophets and everything like that. We need to stop acting like them. The Pharisees were church members. They were elders. They were deacons. They were pastors. They were goody two-shoes trying to point the finger at everyone else. It's impossible to be spiritually mature while we remain emotionally immature. But we have to want to change and to really actually change. So many times we want change in our lives, but we don't want to change our lives. And that's the problem. The heart of the problem is that our heart is the problem. We blame so many things on the devil when it's our own doings that have gotten us there. Or maybe we just need to change where we are. Maybe we're too far away like Peter was and we need to get closer to Christ. We need to change our position. Change where you're standing, because you might just be in the wrong spot. I hope you guys have a great week. Merry Christmas, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.